All right, hello, folks. I see people coming in. I'm going to give it a couple minutes here. It's funny how long it takes for people to join. Like the number ticks up for a couple minutes, so bear with us here. Um, Appreciate you all taking the time. I literally thought it was Friday. Actually, I was going to say Happy Friday, but it's like Tuesday. That's a bad sign. Welcome to tax season.
Not
Um,
yet.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Okay, it looks like it's at least slowed down. So, yeah, I'm Dave Hayes, founder of Juno. Appreciate you guys taking the time. We're going to do a recap first. So, we'll walk through kind of what we've covered in boot camp. But I wanted to introduce, I've got Rebecca Lamis and Jack Flitcroft with me. Actually, I can pull up my slides here. Um, and we're going to walk through export today primarily. So let me bear with me here, guys, while I just get set up. My screen is a mess. I've got 10 things up. Okay, so well, let me do the intros first. Okay, so you got Rebecca Lamos, who's an accountant and also our QA lead. So we QA in most tech companies means like making sure that your technology is going to work. Here, it doesn't just mean that, like meaning that the app is going to load and whatever it might be. It also means that we're going to give we're going to prepare accurate tax returns and that we're going to have accuracy across the whole stack in a bunch of different ways. Like Advisor gives you the right advice, and when we extract data, we actually get the right values. And then Jack is our head of AI and a co-founder as well. And so really happy to have all three of us on today so that you guys don't have to listen to me talk the whole time. Um, and perfect. Today, we're going to go through, so let's do a quick recap of Bootcamp. And then we're going to go through integrations and exports and like best practices there. Um, I'm going to get leave plenty of time for Q&A because I think there are probably going to be quite a few questions today. Um, and we'll talk about that once we get in there, and then we'll talk about what you'll see next. So things up and coming like tips and tricks as you go through tax season, and kind of go through some topics there. So let's start with a quick recap. Jack and Rebecca, you guys are welcome to add in color commentary here, but we started with prep, and then we covered review, and then we covered binder, and then advisor. Right. So we've covered kind of four different topics here. And, basically we're walking through kind of tips and tricks as we go through. We will have recordings of all these that we're going to send out to everyone. But at a really high level, like the primary value of Juno today is in extracting data and preparing something like 85-90% of the data entry on a tax return in just a few minutes, right? So the goal is like typically in like 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the complexity of the return. We've extracted all of the data off all the standardized documents. As we mentioned, we are starting to use some unstructured data like charitable contributions off an organizer. We're intentionally being a little conservative about that, but we'll scale that as we get through even this tax season. And then we are going to push it into your tax software. And we've done all the mappings ahead of time to know that, code AJ in box 14 on a K1 needs to go right here in ProConnect, or there's adjustments that need to be made along the way in certain circumstances, or a 1098 for mortgage interest needs to be put in with the mortgage amount in this module so that the tax software can calculate the limitation on deductible mortgage interest, right? So we've got all this logic built in to try to make it simpler for you and your team to be able to use it. And then we communicate any decisions that have been made along the way or things that we didn't export in your tax software with Binder. And we kind of talked about that as well. But that's the primary, goal there is that we're doing more and more of like the data entry portion of preparation so that you're left with like the strategic things or the, exceptional things or the things that like if they had a child that year where you might need to gather additional context before you can enter that data accurately. And so that's kind of how we've designed the system overall. Again, it works like alongside you and kind of communicates with you along the way, which we talked about as well. And then the goal there is to like really make sure that the time you basically first start working on a tax return, you're something like 80 or 90% of the way down the road. In fact, I'll give you guys a fun stat that I was pumped about last night. Our top user last week, just one person, did 73 tax returns. And we're not even really like in the throes of tax season yet. So I was kind of blown away by that. My firm used to do 600 a year. So to think that one person did 73 in a week is something I've never experienced. But and that person was not an outlier. There actually were a couple other folks that were right there too. So I was just really excited to see that, to think of like what's possible for firms with this technology, right? It would have taken me, I mean, with my staff, it would take me a really long time to do 73 returns, not because they're not good staff, but just meaning like doing it manually would take forever. So was really pumped about that. So anyways, that's what we've covered so far in boot camp. Any comments, Jack or Rebecca, on that?
No, no additions. But like Dave had mentioned, just to kind of tee up the conversation for today, one thing that we saw a lot of questions on was the actual integration process, right? The pushing the data to your tax software. It's probably the most critical step of this whole process. So that's what we're going to be really focused on here today. So as you guys have any questions there, please feel free to ask them. I'm here looking at the chats. I'll be answering them as we go.
Yeah, perfect. There's probably going to be a lot of Q&A, guys, today, and that's okay. We're totally good with it. We'll be hammering through those questions. They're really important. And that's the most complex piece, ironically, is integrating with your tax software. So we'll talk more about that momentarily. Okay, so let's talk about overall tips and tricks. And so I'm going to do this and I'm going to show you some of the mapping, and then we can jump into specific integrations and give you guys tips and tricks on specific integrations. One of the challenging pieces here is these are all slightly different because the way you interact with tax software can be a little bit old school. Many of you probably been using the same software for like a decade or more, and it probably hasn't changed a whole lot in that time. And so we're doing integrations in ways that you would not typically do an integration for modern software. Like most modern software has an open API and anything can connect to it. Like not joking, probably 95% of software these days. But in the tax industry, 95% of tax software does not have an API or does not have an open API that you can access as a partner like Juno. So we've got like eccentricities basically in terms of how we do that. But I wanted to cover just a couple things up front. So you're running through Prepare first, and you're extracting all the information. And when you're done extracting, you're going to jump over to your desktop app. And so there's a couple things that happen here, and I'm going to pull up my desktop app. Actually, I think I need to reshare. Bear with me here, guys, so I can share my whole desktop. All right. So you should be able to see this now. Your desktop app for most of you, so this is where it gets really complex. For like CCH Access, as an example, you actually can do this portion in the browser. And over time, like we will be moving more of these platforms to the browser as we get API access to the platforms. There's going to be more coming this year on that front, which we're really excited about. I've got my fingers crossed that you're going to see kind of a breakthrough in the industry this year where people are allowing more API access. And there's a big player that's going to be driving that. And you'll hear more about that when we get just past April 15th. Um, so, but you're going to come into this and you've selected your client, right? So, all you do is go in here and you select a client. I'm going to take my Daisy Duck, and then you can map these. It basically will say like rescan forms. Actually, I'll show you exactly what this looks like. If I say scan existing forms or skip scan, basically what happens right now is we go into your tax software at this moment and we look at the pro forma return and we pull back in the data, like, your pro forma data. So if you say you had this W-2 last year, or you had this K-1 last year, or you had this Schedule C, we're pulling the names or addresses, depending on what it is, of those different things in so that you can map into the correct form. So I'm gonna like say this again, just because I think this part is really critical and a little bit hard to understand. If I scan the existing forms, actually, I'm just going to scan this for you guys so you can see it. Actually, this will take a minute, but um, bear with me here for 1 second. I can't type while typing my password. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and scan this, and you guys will see. Like I'm in ProConnect. This looks slightly different for each tax software. In ProConnect, you do have to log back in each time, which is very annoying. But that's a ProConnect thing, not a Juno thing. But that being said, you're going to select the return that you're looking for. And then, it's going to go on and start scanning all of these things automatically. You'll see this thing start to run here, and it's pulling back in all the data from this return. Like I was saying, it's going through and seeing like what was in there last year. Not pulling in actual like numbers from these forms because there typically aren't numbers yet. It's just pulling like the name of a Schedule C, the address of a Schedule E, the institution name of a brokerage statement, things like that, and that informs the actual matching that you're going to see when we go back to the application. So the point there is you've got prior year data mapped to these things. And the best example of this would be a Schedule C or a Schedule E, where you actually have like fixed assets that can be pushing to that particular rental property, as an example. Or you could have like home office or a business use of a vehicle that's pushing to a Schedule C, or you could have assets also pushing to a Schedule C. But point being there, like if we don't put it in the right Schedule C or the right Schedule E, then you got to go back in and remap all your fixed assets, which is going to waste a lot of time. So this is a really critical step to both maintain prior year data as well as as well as like prevent work. Right. And so we don't want to overwrite data, and we don't want to create busy work for no reason, especially given that there could be errors if you didn't remap the assets or whatever it might be. So I've gone and scanned it, and you can see I've got a bunch of this is actually a return that has a huge amount of data. So I'm just going to show you a few of these. It's not worth going through every single one, but you can see. Let me start at the bottom here and see. So you can see like a 1099 NEC, I can map to other income, or I can map to a Schedule C. And it gives me like the name of the 1099 that is coming from. So I could say that's a Schedule C. And if I choose Schedule C, this Schedule C didn't have a name. I don't know if you guys noticed that when it was scraping it, but if it had a name, it would say, whatever it might be, Joe's Crab Shack here. And I can select that. And now it's going to push it into that specific Schedule C. So be aware that if you're doing that, like we're going to write into the fields on that Schedule C, and typically you're going to be doing this before you've done work on the tax return. That does keep things much simpler. um, but there would be cases where, I guess, Jack, that's probably a good first question of like, in the case where I have information in the Schedule C. So let's say I have like a supplies expense and I'm pushing in a new supplies expense, and I'm just asking you this because I don't know the answer across every tax software. How's it going to work with data that might already be in the schedule?
Yeah, so it will actually just append to the end of it. And that's with
Yep.
ProConnect as well. You can also map multiple items to the same schedule right on this screen here. So if you had two NECs, yep, exactly. What it's just going to go ahead and do is go to the same Schedule C. It opens up in ProConnect. You get like a little pop-up. I think ProConnect users will know exactly what I'm talking about here. And then you get a bunch of rows. It just finds the next open row, enters that data in there, and all the previous data there stays put, and it doesn't get removed or touched. So we kind of operate on a general principle of not modifying existing data, unless you're mapping like a W-2 to an existing W-2, and we will update the fields that Juno has, but we won't touch any of the other fields, right? And that is true across all of the tax softwares. There are some nuances and some subtle differences in the way that we push data, and how that works for different tax softwares. And I'm happy to talk through some of those, but in general, that's the principle that we operate by. So we've gotten questions from folks in the past of like, hey, if you input this W-2 information, sometimes I will actually use the tax software to do tax projections, right? And so during off season, you might go into a return and enter a bunch of, garbage data. You couldn't rely on Juno to go in there and remove that information, because to us that's like an unsafe action. We want to just be adding data or updating data that we have. So in general, that's what you're going to expect. That's what you're going to see. Like I said, I know there's all sorts of situations where it would be nice if Juno did delete the extra data. But again, if we did that in one case, then it's going to break another case. So in general, we try to make it really simple by just saying we're always going to just add or update the existing fields. We don't delete extra fields.
Yeah, it's an important thing. I mean, generally speaking, in the accounting world, we don't want to be having like a system go in and power delete anything. So that's why we do that. I understand there might be some cases where you would want to do that, but but I think in general, like not allowing your staff to do that is probably a better best practice in my opinion. So anyways, that's why we don't go and delete data. We try to like wherever possible, not overwrite data and not delete data, so that in case you had already done work on that return, you really wouldn't want to like go in and do this really quickly and then discover that we deleted a bunch of data that you had spent a lot of time doing in the return. So in general, we try not to do that. If I've previously exported some of these documents, and you can see Schedule E mapping here as well. Like again, some of these, this is a blank return, so I don't have like an address. This would normally be an actual address here on the Schedule E. But if I previously exported this information, one thing to know is automatically it's going to skip these forms, right? And then here's K1 matching as well. I can push this to the specific K1 that I want, or I can add a new one. And so that's basically how this works. It's not super complex, but it's one of those things that you're going to want to take a minute to make sure you're doing correctly because of the work it avoids, right? On the back end, if you were to have to remap fixed assets or remap a home office, things like that. And so be aware of that. This is a really important step. And you can also skip that scan if you wanted to do that for some reason. I can't think really of a reason you'd want to skip it. It really only takes like 1 minute, as you guys saw, and it's going to really help you get better accuracy as you import that information. So we don't have to watch the rest of the export, but I will start it just for the heck of it here. This is again going to go pull up the ProConnect window like it did before, and it's going to start putting in the data. And like I know that there's going to be a bunch of people that don't use ProConnect on this particular call, but I'll just show you kind of like it will be clicking around in a ProConnect window, and it's putting all that data in, while you can go do something else on your computer. The nice part about ProConnect, it's a browser-based integration, so we open a Chromium browser. And then it just is able to run completely in the background. That's not true with every piece of software. We would build it that way if that were possible with every piece of software, I promise you. But the main thing with ProConnect is just like the only thing I can't really do here to get into ProConnect basically like we download the Chromium browser with us, so that's pretty much automated. But you just can't close the browser mid export. If you do, it's going to say you had a failed export. And so basically you can do anything else. I can go and work in a different, to be honest, even in ProConnect, I can go and work in a different tax return, in a different browser window. So you could do that, and I could also just go do something else with that time if I wanted to while it's running in the background. And when it's complete, it's just going to say export complete in the application here, and it will tell me that I can go on and do the next thing. This one might take a while because I keep loading more and more documents in here. So this is probably like the 1,000 fields or something. And again, like typically in ProConnect, I think in most softwares, this is like maybe 3 to 5 minutes for a typical return. A little bit shorter if you've got a pretty simple return. It might only take like 90 seconds, but it depends on the software. We are like it completely depends on the rate limiting of the different types of software. So that's the mapping process. I guess I don't know if Rebecca, you want me to switch over to you or keep you. I can keep presenting actually now that I'm already kind of in this thing if you want me to, but you tell me. We can swap or we can stay. Oh, did I lose you? All
You
right. Well, then
guys
I'm gonna.
through.
There we go.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sorry, Rebecca. Do you want to take over? Or do you want me to keep presenting?
Yeah, I got it. You're all good.
Perfect. Okay. Hold on. I'm going to stop my share. Then I'll let you take over here for a moment, and I'm going to look at the Q&A.
Perfect. And yeah, Jack and Dave, feel free to call out anything in the QA as we go through each of these softwares. I saw there's already
Yeah, I saw the one
no.
question while you're pulling that up, Rebecca. Jack, do you want to talk a little bit about form, like the matching, and then like where we don't match, I guess would probably be most important for people. And just so as an example, like on a 1099 INT, right? Like not having enough, like it's not data isn't as relevant, and also we don't typically have as much to match on. So you want to talk a little bit about just overall kind of why we're matching in certain places, and then how that works.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely.
So, and I'll answer a couple of questions while we do this too. So there's actually a question just on this, right? Why don't we see options for the 1099B? I saw it in ProConnect, but they didn't show up in the matching. We don't match on every form, and we do this intentionally. Now, this is something that we're open to, changing. If there's large feedback that people want 1099B matching, it's something we're definitely capable of doing. The reason why we don't is because we don't do it for forms that don't really need that because they don't have pro forma information that rolls over, and therefore adding a new form each time actually has no material impact to the return. And that does two things. So one, it speeds up the scan process significantly because we're not scanning for a bunch of forms that you really don't need to match on. And then two, we're actually making it simpler for you guys where, again, if you have a form type that doesn't need any matching, you don't have to sit there and figure out which index it goes under. It'll just add the new form each time. And again, that doesn't impact the return materially in a negative way. I'll give you another example is like 1098s on the Schedule A. That's something that is, I mean, it's actually very difficult to match on because those properties could show up on either the Schedule A, they can show up in two spots in the Schedule A and Pro Connect and Lacert. Different tax softwares work different ways too. And then they could also be on a Schedule E. So there is also this point where, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but there is kind of a line that we start to draw in the sand where, okay, if something gets too difficult to the point of we need extra context from you as the CPA, we're not going to be making those decisions. We're going to actually intentionally leave that work back on your plate. We're trying to do a majority of the busy work that is repetitive, it's deterministic, you do it the same way each time. But there are parts of the return, parts of the preparation where Juno just is not able to do that reliably because we don't have actually the context of the specific client and their information, right? That is something we're going to build towards. That's kind of our North Star for the next couple of years. But right now, it's again, it's a design decision of how this works, of us being very intentional about what we do and also what we don't do. And then to answer a couple of questions in the chat, will there be any boot camps that will be specific for the tax software we use? Possibly, we are trying to
Great
look at getting
question.
those set up, but I don't want to confirm anything yet because we
Yeah.
haven't actually finalized anything there. But we definitely hear you guys. This was kind of like literally last week as we started the boot camps. We realized that this was a very specific, like high touch point need. So we're trying to get those going. Not 100% sure if we will have it in time for you guys, but that is a goal for us right now. And
And
then
something else to add there as well is definitely go to support.juno.tax. Every single tax software has about four different articles with demo videos included, with screenshots that basically walk through a lot of what we're going to talk about today, in addition to just kind of like the process of getting both your integration set up with Juno and then also the process of the export. So it's a really nice place to start for kind of a deeper dive. And we're even pushing out a new batch of demo videos next week. And that'll be something myself and our head of product, Grant, are filming this week. So definitely that's a nice place to start for like your deep dives on your various tax software.
Yeah, that's a good. So in support.juno.tax, guys, we are constantly updating that. We've got like hundreds of help articles, and it will run through each specific export and like current issues that we're seeing because like even next week this will be a little bit out of date. So that's a really good place to go. We're constantly updating that. There's a couple other questions I was going to handle really quickly here on if source documents are added later, they automatically get added to the binder, and then they automatically get skipped in export. So like because that's a really common occurrence, right? So if they submit 8 out of 10 documents and then they do the two later, it's going to automatically skip the eight and only import the two. And so that works basically really well with what typically happens in that case. So you could choose to actually go back and add the previous eight. I don't know why you would do that, but if you'd like deleted the return for some reason, you could go back and do that manually if you wanted to. Generally speaking, you're probably not going to do that. My guess is you're going to have a draft return and then just add the last two documents. But if you really needed to for some reason, you could go back and add them all. Like if I don't know if you're going to create a duplicate of a return for planning purposes or something, you could just re-export if you wanted to do that. And then there was a question about sorry, I'm just looking. There's in the binder. So sign like you can export the binder to PDF. So you can do whatever you want to do over there. And like once it's in PDF, you can go and you can do throw it in Adobe or whatever you want to do and annotate it from there. So you definitely don't have to just use that in our app. One comment I want to make, and we talked about this a little bit in the binder session, is just that like more and more we're going to make that interactive inside the app, and there's some like really specific reasons for that in terms of what you can do. Um, a PDF, like marking up a PDF fundamentally to me has never actually made sense. I think we do it because we used to have real binders. And so that's like what humans were doing. And we're just all very like, we're used to doing the process, whatever the process might be. With AI, being able to use agents to go and check like 8,000 different things in just a few minutes, you're going to want to have an interactive binder. And I don't want to like, preview this too much because I want to allow this to play out over the next kind of 12 months. But just know that that binder is going to become more interactive in different ways because we can use AI to automate certain parts of that and to like make better notes than a human would make, right? And so that is something that the team's working pretty actively on. And we did talk a lot about binder a couple days ago, and definitely if you guys want to go back to that session, we spent a whole hour on it. So there's a lot of information there.
There's one last question I'll
Yep.
answer quick before, and then we can move on. That looks like we've got everything. Sid, just because Sid highly here asked in the Q&A channel, um, if if there's pro forma information coming from 24 to 25, and let's say there's a 1099 int, and that your client has closed down the account, so they don't have interest from that account anymore. Again, so in that case, we don't delete those line items, right? ProConnect or Drake or most tax softwares will pull over the pro forma data. If they didn't delete it and it still exists, we will scan that and you can select that from the drop down. So instead of hitting add or skip, you can actually select the index and it will say like usually the payer's name or the institution name right there. So you can match it on it. So that way, instead of us creating a new one and you having to delete the one that the tax software created, we'll just match on the existing one. But again, just kind of back to the fundamental philosophy of Juno's not going to go in there and delete these other forms and mess with any other parts of your return. So it is an expected part of the process where, again, if your client changes and they, close a couple of accounts where they don't have these 1099s anymore and the tax software pulls that over, you will have to go in there and clean that up, right? Because we just don't have that context. It wouldn't be a safe action for us to do. So I understand it's probably a little bit painful, a little bit annoying, but again, you can imagine the case where we do that and we're wrong, right? Because we don't actually know that this is the correct action to be making. We don't want to be making those like dangerous maneuvers without your input.
And one
Yeah,
other,
we're very thoughtful about what we automate. Just, I want to echo that. Like, I want to make sure that we're doing, again, like we want to do 90% or 95% of the data entry in 5 to 10 minutes, right? Like that's our kind of North Star. We're not targeting 100% because in order to do that, we would have to automate parts of this that would potentially create a lot more work for you if it went sideways. And that then all of a sudden it's not worth using. Like I'd rather do something very consistently, very accurately, and in a transparent way that we could do over and over again for every return. That's going to be a better user experience for folks than just firing off. Like we could take a swing at all this stuff on the organizer and try to mess with everything in the tax return. But if I don't know that I can do that accurately, and I don't know that the user will have a good understanding of what I did in the tax return, then there's a really large risk that we create a mistake on that return. And we don't want to do that. So we're intentionally very conservative about like where we're putting information and how we communicate that to users.
so I'll go ahead and jump in. So we're going to spend about 60 seconds just doing the high level of kind of tips and tricks for each of the tax softwares here. And definitely, like I said, all of this information that I'm sharing with you are on our support articles as well. So definitely take a deep dive there after. There's lots of demo videos that walk through this, and feel free to ask questions related to your tax software as we go through. Jack will definitely jump in and answer quite a few of them. So starting with ProConnect, which you guys just saw, high level, a couple of the biggest things to note here is one, you always want to use Pro. That's how we've built out our Juno integration with ProConnect. So that's a really big flag for you guys. Two, something that's really important here to note, and it's pretty consistent for all the softwares, but definitely ProConnect is once you start your export, we kind of like to say hands off. just let it run through. You don't want to necessarily open another browser, open up another return, or even go onto another part of your computer because essentially our AI is connected to the ProConnect browser. It's pushing data in automatically. And so you just want to let it run through its process properly and really ensure that data doesn't end up, we don't end up breaking the system, right? And breaking the push of data into ProConnect. So definitely, my biggest recommendation is once you start an export, hands off, watch it run through. And then, as you can kind of see in the bottom right of this slide, you will know when it's done because there will be a export ProConnect complete sign for you. So that's a really nice way to check. Something else to note that we've been getting from customers quite a bit, for those of you that are using TaxStone, is there has been an issue where some of our customers are seeing duplications of clients. And the reason that is occurring is because we essentially, a client sync that occurs at the beginning of our process when you're setting up your app integration to your tax software, but we also do that for TaxStone customers simultaneously. We have an integration already built in to your TaxStone customer base. So what we are recommending for everyone that is a TaxStone customer, except CCH customers, is you skip the client sync at the beginning of the integration because that is automatically going to happen because you're connected to TaxStone. And I saw a couple questions about that yesterday on our call, so just wanted to flag that for you guys. And then the last kind of big pro tip, which Dave definitely mentioned, is we always recommend scanning. It's a really nice way to just see and confirm what data has already been pushed to ProConnect. And also a really great feature that's actually getting pushed out on Thursday, and this kind of goes back to some of your questions, is we are starting on Thursday within your application. We're going to have a column that also says for every single form the date it was last exported and the individual on your team that exported that data. So that's a really nice way as well, on top of scanning, to kind of keep track of what data and what forms have been pushed into your tax softwares. And this is for all 5 tax softwares. It's a really nice addition that we're going to see come out on Thursday to help you guys keep track of what's been exported, who's exported it, and what you have left, especially as you're adding additional source documents later on as you're building out your client's return. A couple other kind of small items from the ProConnect perspective is ProConnect, you have to, essentially, you're going to have this pop up, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, that requires you to sign in to ProConnect. Unfortunately, you do have to do this anytime you're doing a scan or doing an export. It does require you to keep re-logging in. That's something on the ProConnect side. We don't have to do that with any of our other softwares. So just get into the habit of, looking behind your browser, looking behind the Juno app, and usually there's a little modal that pops up for you to sign in. And so once you sign in, to initiate the actual export, you do have to select the client's return. So the second you select your client and open the return, then the export begins. And it's really important to note here that if you were to accidentally select the wrong client, it could begin the export, right? So you really want to make sure that you are selecting your right client before that begins. A couple
And Rebecca,
other,
can I touch on that real quick?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so to interject real quick here, we do this across all the tax softwares, but we intentionally make you select the client. Originally, last year when we built the version 1 of this, we were actually automatically doing that. What we noticed was that a lot of firms, and I just want to make this clear because it might seem like silly, right? You have the client name, why can't you search and select it? We could, we did that originally, but a lot of firms, especially with families, will actually have the same client name for all the husband, the spouses and the children. And that makes it obviously very difficult for our system to know which one to select. The other situation is some firms will actually create duplicate clients, one that has just the pro forma information and one that they're adding data to for the current tax year. So that way, if they ever need to roll back or see what was last year, they can do that very easily. There's all sorts of strategies that different firms take. And because we're building for small firms, we need to make sure that we're not breaking or doing anything odd within your process. Part of that, again, is us pulling back and not automatically selecting the client. Just because you guys will know specifically what tax return it goes into. So it can seem a little bit laborious, a little bit irritating. Hey, it takes a couple of extra seconds each time. I get it. But at the same time, there's not really a safe way for us to know exactly which return you want this to go into. And it's just a piece that we've intentionally decided to give you control over to ensure that that's done correctly each time.
Thank you for that, Colin. And every tax software kind of has a different process for how the client is selected. Sometimes it's through client IDs, sometimes it's physically selecting the client, sometimes it's through SSN. So definitely, we've been very intentional about that. And once again, that's something in the like support.juno.tax. We go into detail on exactly those steps. So especially if this is your first year using Juno, you're just jumping in, highly, highly recommend for both yourself and your firm to kind of review those articles. Only it'll take 5 to 10 minutes, but it's going to have every single last kind of detail for you for your software. And ProConnect's really nice. It's probably one of the easier ones because it is web browser based. So those are kind of the high level items. We're going to move on to Lacert now, unless anyone has any other ProConnect questions pop up. I don't see anything at the moment. All right. So now heading into Lacert. Lacert is definitely one of the more complicated ones due to the SDK drive. And what I will say before kind of jumping into this, more than anything, the most important part of the Lacert setup is really getting the SDK drive installed properly and connected to the Juno integration app, and really ensuring that your file path is properly connected to the Juno app. And as a lot of you guys know, Lacert is sending updates to their app almost on a daily basis, to their tax software on a daily basis. And we do have a team that is every morning running tests on all the tax softwares and confirming no updates have been pushed out. So we are auto updating the Juno app on a daily basis to update to any new items that have occurred within the tax software. So there's nothing you need to worry about that. Traditionally, once you have the SDK installed for 2025, and you have built the right path and you've connected the right path, it's pretty clear and straightforward from there. And we have a great customer support team that can run through this with you if it's your first time getting set up. But that's definitely kind of the first major, I would say, hurdle with Lacert is really making sure that looks proper. But we do have a really nice and clear kind of modals within the integration app for Lacert. So once you have connected your path properly, you'll get a little notification that says your clients have synced. It'll be very obvious that you have done it properly because all of your clients are now going to be listed in the integration app that are also within ProConnect. And it's a really nice kind of clean process once you get there. And so then, once you have the setup proper and you have synced the clients, and also note here, as I mentioned with ProConnect, if you are a TaxDome user, you will skip the sync client process for the cert because we automatically sync those clients for you because you're a part of TaxDome. So you can skip that process at the beginning of the app. And I know our customer support team has gotten a lot of questions there over the last 2 weeks. So definitely want to flag that for you guys. So then moving into Lacert. So once you have set up the app and integrated it properly, it's very similar to ProConnect. You essentially are going to open up Lacert and you will have your client opened up that you want to export, similar to what Dave was just doing with ProConnect. Exact same layout. You select the forms and the documents and the data that you want to export into your client's return. What is different for Lacert than ProConnect is instead of actually selecting on the individual client for the export, you actually just want to have kind of that main page open for Lacert where all your clients' returns are listed. Because what Lacert is doing is it's actually matching via the client ID. So it's really important with Lacert that you are putting in the client ID information, and it'll require you on the Juno app side to do this, but make sure you put the client ID in on the Juno integration app in addition to the client ID that is representative of that return within your Lacert software. And that's how we basically match the clients. So for ProConnect, for example, you select on the individual client. For Lacert, our matching is done through the IDs and really making sure the client IDs are the same. So that's a really important thing to flag, is making sure your client IDs line up in that way. Otherwise, the export won't necessarily go through. And then beyond that, a couple other items, because to flag as well is so when you are beginning that export, like I said, do not select the client, have all the clients listed. It will not do the export if you have a specific client return open, which is a little different than some of the other processes. And then same kind of thing, once the automation begins, it'll be pretty clear. Data is just going to start going into the various forms. Just like ProConnect, we kind of say hands off, let it go through the whole process. It really only takes like 5 minutes to export. It never takes that long. So just kind of watch the data move, have your browsers fully open, have your tax software fully open, integration app fully open, and allow the data to get pushed into the system. Um, and that's really about it. And with the cert as well, and this is emphasized within the kind of customer support articles, we do kind of walk you through the process of how to make sure that you have the correct cert driver attached to the integration software. There is some permissions you have to grant essentially the first time you're setting this up. But we do, require kind of the customer support onboarding calls once you are getting set up with your tax software. So our team should have walked through all of those items with you. But of course, if you have any questions, just email support@juno.tax and they will set up a call with you to kind of run through this process if you're having any problems connecting your SDK and getting the right access and confirmation there. But that's high level items on the cert. Jack, anything else you would add in here from the cert tips and tricks?
Nope, you've covered
Awesome.
it. It's very similar to ProConnect, like you had mentioned. So,
Awesome. Awesome. And any cert questions? Looks like most of them have been answered. Awesome. So I will go ahead and jump on over to the next software. Okay, so next we have Drake, and Drake's really great. It, I believe, is our most used software among our clients. So definitely very applicable for a lot of folks, I'm sure, on here. So Drake is very, so it's a little different, but relatively similar to the Lacert process in the sense of when you are setting up the Drake integration app and getting everything set up, there's going to be a handful of settings that you kind of have to go through and set properly for the first time before you begin all of your exports associated to Drake. And so you can kind of see in these images down here, we have highlighted exactly what is you need to be checking and not checking to make sure that the automation occurs properly and runs properly. And like I said as well, these are all in our customer support articles. It lists out every single one and exactly kind of what settings you want from Drake to be able to do all of our exports really cleanly. And of course, as always, our customer support team is there to run you through them. Just to kind of say them verbally right here, we have to uncheck W-2 wage verification. We have to set missing field warnings to never. We have to turn on grid data entry. We have to turn off audible calc X alerts. And then we have to set pause calc to after view or print only. But yeah, just some very niche specific items that you need to get set up on the Drake side to allow all of our exports to run properly. And then once you have set up Drake, everything's connected to your integration app, you've synced your clients. We definitely similar to ProConnect, recommend always scanning for existing client documents before mapping because that's a really nice way to ensure there are no duplicates and it protects kind of the carryover of data. Similar to, as I mentioned with the past two softwares, if you are a TaxStone user, you do not need to sync your clients through the integration app and through our process. It automatically occurs when you join from TaxStone. So to ensure there's no duplication of clients, make sure you skip that process because it will automatically occur because you're part of our TaxStone integration. And then once you are actually doing the export itself, a couple of the kind of key tips and tricks here is one, you want to open up Drake and the client return that you are specifically pushing into. And you need to essentially make it most of the screen, but not full screen. And you don't want it to hang off on the right or left of your computer because essentially, to make sure that our app is connected to Drake and it is reading it properly and pushing the data nicely into Drake. You just kind of want Drake to be in there, main screen, open Juno, make it both the screens quite large. Don't allow them to fall off to the right or the left of your computer screen, like hanging off. We even have a notification actually now that alerts you if your Drake window is kind of hanging off the screen, but that's really important to do. And then same kind of thing is like once you begin the export process, completely hands off and the data just gets pushed through. And, really emphasizing here with Drake, the major items that are causing failures for individuals with Drake, it's often when you're just starting to set it up, is it usually has to do with incorrect Drake settings or not having the full screen window properly for Drake or just skipping the initial scan. And so definitely always make sure you scan so we know what documents have already been exported. But yeah, those are kind of the main items here with Drake. Anything else, either Jack or Dave, you would add, or any specific questions we should bring up?
Yeah, real quick, because everything that Rebecca said on the common failures is super important, especially the settings piece. A majority of the time, the issues are just simply caused by those. Moving from one tax year of the software to the next, in Drake specifically too, they actually give you like a new download, right? It's a totally separate application. Those settings don't transfer over from 2024 to 2025. So if you set up Juno, months ago and you were using 24 and that was working for you, but then you're having issues with 2025. I would recommend looking through the support articles. I posted them in the chat. I can post them again if anyone needs, for what the setup looks like. Just making sure that your 2025 application has the settings correct for what Juno needs, because again, those don't transfer over, and that goes for again all tax softwares.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for flagging that. And even just to the customer support pieces, right? We are always pushing out more feature requests, more forms, adding more updates to what we're doing. So definitely, as you use Juno over the next couple of years, we always recommend kind of going through the customer support articles before you're beginning your tax season, before you're beginning extensions, just to get kind of the high level updates, right? And things like this will be noted in those articles. So if there's anything that maybe is missing from last year, something that's new that we've added, it's a really nice place for you to just kind of get your groundings before you start your tax season and make sure you're not missing anything. So definitely, we always recommend running through those. And yeah, that's a great call out, Jack, that from 2024 to 2025, these settings don't transfer over. So you just want to make sure you set those up again. Okay, I'll head over to our next software. Alrighty, Ultra Tax. And before I jump into this, I know this has been a very pressing question that has come up is as for any of our UltraTax users, UltraTax works a little bit differently than the rest of the tax softwares. It has a separate application called Source Data Entry, which is essentially where the vast majority of all of our data and forms actually gets pushed to. And unfortunately, UltraTax has not pushed out the update for source data for 2025. It is actually coming this week officially, and we need about a week turnaround time to get our bearings set up and ready to go for all of our features to be set up and running for 2025 source data entry with UltraTax. So I know that's been a very common question on if we're ready to go for 2025. And because UltraTax is finally releasing their 2025 update for source data entry this week, you should expect to see that roughly within a week, hopefully into next week. We will be sending out the updates so all of our UltraTax customers can get going there. So yeah, so
Yeah,
going.
one comment there. We
Mhm.
will do it as fast as we can. We don't know yet, like the data entry module. Um, what it's going to look like for 20, like how many changes there will be, right? So that could be really fast for us. Our team will jump on it as soon as we get access to it. Just be aware and we'll get it out as fast as we possibly can.
And then something else that I will add that is also new just within the really last month, we do now support virtual office for UltraTax. So that's a really kind of exciting update that we wanted to get out before the beginning of this tax season. And it essentially almost works identically to the UltraTax, just traditional CS softwares and applications. But that is a fun update for any of our UltraTax users because we know we have a lot of clients that were waiting for that additional update to be pushed out. So now just kind of running through UltraTax, very similar to Drake, kind of has a very specific kind of settings and niche process for doing the client sync. So as you can kind of see down here on the right, UltraTax, for those of you that may or may not be familiar, there are specific settings that we do require you to check, uncheck, same kind of items as Drake that are really critical to make sure they are selected properly before you begin any of your tax season exports. Because similar to Drake, if you don't necessarily have all the settings correctly set, you could just end up with not having proper exports being pushed through the system. So definitely, here are some screenshots. Like I said, we have those customer support articles that run through every single item. Just to call out a couple of them, the SDE, you need to uncheck the other options. For the 1099B, you want to do use payers names only. UT display, folder block, you want to select wide. Statements be checked, diagnostics be checked. So there's all of those kind of very specific niche settings that we definitely recommend running through them. And I'm not sure, I don't think UltraTax carries settings over as well into 2025. So in a similar manner, at the beginning of the tax season, once you have updated your apps, you are going to want to run through those settings again. And so then once you have all your settings correctly ready to go, kind of your pre-export checklist, for UltraTax specifically, you are going to open UltraTax CS, and you are also going to open the source data entry. So you want to have both apps open properly for this part of the process. And then you will select the specific client return that you want to push in there and use the OpenSDE tool to really run the export properly. And very similar, keep all windows open. Once you begin the export, hands off. And you will also note that you will get a pop-up. UltraTax is the only one of our 5 softwares that do this. And before you begin your export, it's going to ask for the SSN. This is kind of the way that we are also checking that the client export is going to the right client return. And we're doing this by the SSN. So essentially the SSN that you put in when Juno's app, like you click export for your client's return, and then you're going to get this pop-up that says to enter your client's social security number. And we do even have like a little flag that says we are not keeping this data by any means. It is only for matching for this specific return in that moment. So it is kind of the way that we have set up the system to make sure we are finding the right client. And then, very similar, once you have begin the export, you enter the SSN, the automation runs. And similar, keep your hands off, just let it push through the system. It'll only take 5 minutes or so. And then once you are done, you will get a little kind of pop-up that says, export complete. And then you can hop back into UltraTax. And as you know, you will essentially, because UltraTax has these 2 applications, you will go through and kind of accept all the data for your client within the actual UltraTax CS application after you've pushed through source data. So you'll just see that you'll hop into the main Juno tax returns. You'll click on your client And then you're going to get a bunch of pop-ups on data that you can accept that was just pushed into the source data entry application piece of the software. And that's, I'm sure for all of our UltraText users, you're very familiar with that process. So that's, I think, kind of the main items for UT. And we're definitely really excited to get this pushed out as soon as we can, for sure. All right. And then our last one is going to be CCH. Anything, I guess, on UltraTax, Jack, before we wrap up with CCH here?
Yeah, just one. Actually, thank you. I can't remember who asked the question, but the question was, do we need to have these settings set for every user, or is it just one user and it's done? It is every user because the settings happen on the user level, not the firm level. So you'll want to make sure that your whole team walks through this process. Again, it doesn't take more than a couple of minutes. It's one and done for the tax season. But just make sure that everyone on your team using this, and this again goes for just all tax softwares. I'm going to continue using that phrase, but just doing the initial setup and making sure that the settings are correct for everybody will save you a lot of pain in the middle of season in case someone doesn't do that and they're going, oh, Juno's not working, it's not entering the data correctly, but it is for, some other folks in your team. It's almost most likely that the settings are just not set correct. So make sure that's done for all users on your team.
Yeah, and
Yeah, and just
definitely,
one quick comment there.
Mhm.
If you guys get stuck, go to the help center or contact support at juno.tax. You're welcome to. And they'll be like, hey, even if there's a user on your team that hasn't been set up yet, we've got a great team that can help you with that. Don't hesitate to reach out if you're like, whoa, this feels overwhelming. I don't know where to go. We'll point you in the right direction very quickly. It just has to be done once, but it is really critical. Otherwise, you'll see errors in export.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think they are averaging about a 15-minute response time right for working business Monday through Friday. So definitely, definitely, we encourage you guys to reach out to them. They have been great assets and they're full of accountants, they know exactly what you're going through. Great. So we'll just wrap up here with CCH. And this is the newest software that we've added in to the Juno softwares that we are compatible with. So this will be kind of the first year for our tax season that CCH is being used. So just kind of level CCH items. CCH, for me personally, it is my favorite kind of process for connecting your clients and their returns with our application. As you guys, I'm sure, are familiar for CCH users, there's a very specific process you can use in CCH where you obtain a dot file with all of your clients' information. And that is actually all we need essentially to sync your clients on the CCH and Juno side. So as you can kind of see in these images right here on the right, essentially when you are setting up the integration, you will be prompted with this screen right here that is going to ask you for the DAT file for CCH. And then we once again have a link right there on that pop-up that you can click on that walks you through how you obtain this stat file. We have customer support videos and articles that walk through this process, but it's relatively simple. Essentially, you're just going to go to the tax data import and export section. And so for tax data, you would click export.dat file. Then you can go over to kind of the kind of CCH home base with the batch manager. And then you'll see essentially when your data has been exported, you click download, and then you go right back here to your Juno app and you upload your DAT file right there. And then it's going to provide a new DAT file for you then to push into with all of the that you have now validated within Juno, and then that's it. So it's a really, really quick and easy process. You're not going to actually see really like the data being imported similar to the other tax softwares. It's just going to kind of happen in a matter of moments, essentially, as long as you are uploading these files properly,
Oh, Rebecca, you're
in
freezing
my
a little bit.
opinion.
Oh, sorry,
Oh, no
Rebecca, you
worries.
froze there just for a second. So yeah, it's a DAT file exchange, guys. So there's not as much to look at, which actually is very
Mhm.
good. It means it's more stable and it's actually more like an API connection. It's not the same thing, but it's more similar than what you see with ProConnect or Drake and those ones. So So it's a really nice integration. Actually, you can run it out of the browser, so you don't have to have a desktop app at all, which is fantastic. And we are pushing as hard as humanly possible to get API access for all of these platforms. When we've got API access, um, and by the way, every single partner that you guys work with on tax software has APIs, all of them, by the way. And so don't get me off on the tangent of like, why they hide that from people trying to do innovative things like Juno and a bunch of other companies, by the way. But long story short, we think there's going to be some significant good news this year. We already have word from one of the big players. I can't talk about who, but that they're going to open up APIs, and I'm hoping that will push some of the other big software providers to do the same. You've actually seen it going the opposite way, like Drake kicked out Gruntworks this last year from their APIs, so they're making it harder actually. And I'm really optimistic that there's going to be the first domino to fall here in May, and then people are going to have to follow suit. So that being said, you're always welcome to tell your software providers. I mean, I wouldn't tell your salesperson because they're not going to be able to do anything. But if you talk to their head of tax or somebody on their product team or their marketing team, I think it's really important that the whole industry be more open, especially as you start to use more innovative solutions for automation. But I do think you're going to start to see it move in that direction. Right now, CCH and Lacert are both like a data file exchange, and I think we'll add to that list as we go through the year. The one comment I'll make there is when we do it that way, we can literally just use our browser app most of the time, not for Lacert, but for Access, the way we're able to connect with them, which means no desktop download, which is something like 80 or 90% of the issues that we run into or with actually running a desktop app in lots of different environments. So that makes our product better. And it also can be asynchronous, like it can run in the background while you're doing something else in the app, which can make your user experience better and make the whole thing faster. So I think there's some very positive stuff in that direction that's going to happen this year, even over the next few months. In May, I think we'll have our first big update there in terms of changing things to more of an API approach from what you're seeing currently. So we'll push on that as hard as we possibly can. Um, and then I think we can recap, right? Rebecca, are we done with all, we hit everything? Oh, so
Yep,
perfect.
hit all the
Um,
softwares.
yeah, perfect. Well, I know that was a lot to digest, and I appreciate people sticking around. We still have almost everybody here, which is crazy. We are going to do more of these, guys, as we go through, like even over the next couple weeks. I think we're going to make more of this available. We're also going to send all the recordings out for folks as well, so that you've got access to those in case you want to share them with team members. If you ever get stuck, we have an amazing support team. Just hit support@juno.tax. Like we will help you today. You know what I mean? It's not we're not going to put you in like some hold queue for the remainder of the day. We will help you out as quickly as humanly possible. And if you see any mapping issues, I was kind of saying this in chat, it does happen this time of year. For like 2 weeks, they update their software multiple times a day, not just like all of the software providers do this, and they have to, but that can create issues with our integrations. And so it's the buggiest 2 weeks of the whole year. And we're almost through it now because all the 25 software has basically been released. So it's starting to calm down. But if you see anything that's not behaving the way you want, definitely hit support@juno.tax. They go through it and validate like whether or not it's operating correctly. They'll give you really good answers because they know how to use the tax software. They're actually doing QA with Rebecca and team. And so like they're actually doing returns every day, which is pretty cool. So they know how to use the software really, really well. Um, yeah, and if you guys have feedback on other things you want to see, I hear you loud and clear. The one I saw today was like specific export, maybe spending a little bit of time on export with the individual softwares. We definitely have that on our radar. I think you're going to hear an update relatively soon about that. I don't want to commit to it right now because I got to just run it through our team. But I think we're going to do that, and I think we'll do it very soon. If there are other things you think are really important, let us know. Like this is, we know that this is a new process for you during tax season, and we want you to be successful. So we will give you whatever resources you need to be successful. We want firms to be able to come on and use Juno to really improve their processes for all of tax season. And I'll close on that note of like, as I've said many times, like my folks didn't work overtime last year. Like imagine tax season being a 9 to 5 thing. Someone running 73 returns last year, and that person, by the way, didn't seem to be working the weekend. They were doing it during the week. is awesome and makes me so excited for the future of this industry. I really hope that we can have a big impact for you guys this tax season. Our team is working super hard to make sure that we do the best we possibly can for you and your team. If there's other things you want to hear from us, then you can leave it in Modern Tax Pros, or you can email support. Or if you've got product ideas, Modern Tax Pros would be a great place to go, as well as product requests at Juno.tax. So thank you guys so much for the time. I really appreciate it. We did 5 of these. I can't believe I've never talked this much in a week and a half period. But I appreciate all the help from the team, and Rebecca and Jack. Thanks guys for joining as well.
Definitely. Thank you guys. And pulled up the support.juno.tax here. So everything we talked about right here, highly recommend. Also take a look at Modern Tax Pros. We just launched that community in the last couple weeks. So if your firm's not in there, definitely hop in. It's a way where all of our community is kind of going, chatting about feature requests, chatting about questions, learning about all things that have been updated on the Juno side. So definitely get in there. But yeah, thank you guys. I really enjoyed this, and excited to help you guys with your tax season this year.
Perfect. Thanks everybody. Take care.
Good